Well, there's really quite a few African bands that are well known now that you can see regularly.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, Youssou N'Dour from Senegal is very popular now, uh, largely because of Peter Gabriel's support and the Amnesty tour and the recording. On Peter and Peter, Youssou N'Dour recorded on Graceland too.
Yeah.
He was on the Graceland album. But his band, Fela, tours regularly. Sunny Ade plays, Manu Dibango plays, African variety shows play. They play in New York now pretty regularly. You can see them.
Yeah, how important is your role in that? And for instance, Peter Gabriel's role and the role of the French music scene. A lot of African bands go to France, to Paris, and to record there.
Yeah, the West Africans
Yeah.
go to Paris. They were the French colonies, the French-speaking African countries go to Paris to record. So that scene is very important and well established. It hasn't really crossed over into the English-speaking countries yet. I don't know how they are throughout the rest of Europe.
Yeah, Morikante, who comes from a Western African country as well, had a hit single in Holland last year with Yekke Yekke. A brilliant song. He had a #1 hit single.
Oh, really? I never heard it.
It's wonderful. You have to, buy it or perhaps get it. He's called Morikante, and
I will get it. And with all African musicians?
All African musicians. He played on a huge festival in Holland, and everybody's talking about African music, but my theory is, and perhaps it's wrong, that most of the African bands have to be helped into the Western industry.
Yes, to a degree. I think that's so. Just as any of the non-European musical ideas and performers need an introduction. But what I think we've seen is that there's a willingness and an eagerness to hear this kind of music, and so there's an acceptability level that didn't even exist a few years ago. And in a certain sense, African music is almost as powerful and influential as reggae. Mm-hmm. And reggae took a while for it to be accepted. And of course, reggae had a great exponent, a great superstar, which always makes it easier for people to understand. So Bob Marley broke that. But the African music now, there's just more and more of it, and people are listening to African music from all over the continent. The same is true, and is beginning to be true of Brazilian music, South American music. I don't know if that's so in Europe.
Yeah, it's a crossover that Lou Reed brought. What's his name? He comes from Brazil. He's a lawyer. Ruben Blades. The things that Lou Reed and Ruben Blades did.
Ruben. Ruben is from Panama. He's not from Brazil. He's from Panama. That's Latin music. That comes from Cuban, Puerto Rican sources. That's the main influences. But Brazilian music is quite different because Brazil is the country that has the largest African descended population outside of Africa. More than 50% of the country are descendants of Africans. So that music is a very, very powerful African cultural-based music. That's also, I think, beginning to have a resurgence and recognition. And just in general, all of the music from the world communities are more, it's easier to bring them out and for people to hear them.
Joey Mosquera just told me that Graceland is just one little window in the Great Empire State Building in South Africa, which is a beautiful picture in words. But do you agree with him?
I'm not, what does he mean?
Well, we were
Maybe
talking about the effect of the album, of the music, of the mixture of several cultures,
Oh, yeah.
and about the mixture of black and whites.
Well, yes, I agree that it is just a part of the fabric of all of that music. I think that the long-lasting effect of Graceland will be, and in fact has been in the 3 years since Graceland has come out, has been the way that musicians from different cultures can interact and play together. It was the most successful example of an intercultural musical experience, the most successful in terms of popularity. It was a very big hit all over the world. There have been other examples that are artistically brilliant, but they haven't been really big hits. But Graceland was the first really big hit that brought American ideas and mixed it with South African music. And I mean, of course, the first in the first excitement about Graceland, quite naturally, the emphasis was on the South African music because it was so new and refreshing to Western ears. But after all that is settled, one of the things that Graceland contributes, I think, is that it brought African musicians into the Western way of thinking and recording, and that influenced them. And to my way of thinking, the more that musicians are exposed to other musical ideas, the more that their horizon is expanded, and their creativity has the opportunity to flourish and to flower in a way that doesn't happen when you're kept isolated in a cultural ghetto. And what was happening in South Africa before Graceland was that the music was not getting out. Nobody heard the music. And once the music got out, Black Mambazo became a hit all over the world. Hugh Masekela and Miriam Makeba's careers experienced a resurgence. And Ray Peary from Stimela. All of these musicians had to play with other really good musicians from other countries and had a chance to interact. And the ideas that they heard, they brought back into their music, and it influenced their recording. That's just the way it always is with musicians when they're able to play with other players.
How will your next album be like? Will it be a new mix of the things that you did on Graceland, or will it be something completely different? Or will it be back to the cultural basis, like, for instance, South African music?
Yeah, my new album, which I'm about half finished with now, is a combination of Brazilian rhythm and West African. It's a Brazilian West African mix. Yeah. It's totally different from South African music.
But still African music.
It's African and Brazilian.
Yeah.
It's not the music of one culture or the other. It's a combination of the two musical styles.
Yeah.
Which the music is connected because the West Africans the West African in the African diaspora in the days of slavery. It was the West Africans primarily, the Yoruba people from what is now Nigeria, that were sent out. They were the slaves, and they were sent to Brazil, and they were sent to the Caribbean, and up into the Americas. And they took with them the traditions and the religions and the rhythms of their ancestors. And that music and those drums, those are these conga drums and bata, all of these drums, they're West African instruments. So there is an old connection that exists between West Africa, Brazil, and the Caribbean. And the music that I'm working on in this new album is a sort of strange combination of those two cultures.
I'm really curious about that. But over the past 20 years, you reached the goal of being a very good singer-songwriter, but on an Anglo-American basis. And over the past 5 years, 4 years perhaps, for the big audience, you did something completely new. And now you go to the next direction and take the Brazilian and the Western African flavor. That's something new again.
Yes, it's new. It was, in a certain sense, it's a natural progression from Graceland, in that I was aware of different African styles of music, mostly because of Hugh Masekela. It's Hugh Hugh knows that I'm very interested in different cultures' music, and he is he's a scholar of African music, of the continent of African music, and he would show me different players and different styles. And then I recorded with a Brazilian singer named Milton Nascimento, who's a brilliant singer and songwriter. And I sang a duet with him for one of his albums. And he said, you should come to Brazil and play with some Brazilian players. So that's how I went there. And then the other connection of following the African diaspora, the root of the drum, that's just history. So I began to experiment with it. I began to go to Brazil and record drums, and then work with guitarists that I knew, who actually Hugh introduced me to. Some from Ghana, some from Cameroon, and to overdub their music on top of the Brazilian drums. And what was created is this music that really doesn't exist in anywhere. It doesn't have. It's a music that comes from two countries, but the two countries never play together. And then, of course, I always try and write those melodies that feel like my melodies, and my melodies really come out of. They come out of my early memories, so they're American. So they come out of 50s and 60s type of melodic impulses. And then the lyrics are, I don't know, they're always hard to write. They're very hard to write. So it's a combination of cultures, West African, Brazilian, and American. And I look to find a language that is common, a common language between the three cultures, and it has to be made up.
This tour is the second time that you go on the road with the Graceland tour.
That's right.
Right? Is this the last time?
Well, I hope not. I hope not. This tour came about in a way not by accident, but Do you know Johnny Clegg?
Yeah.
South African?
Yeah, he's South African as well.
Well, Johnny Clegg called me and asked if I would be willing to participate in a big anti-apartheid concert to be held in Paris. And I said I would if all the guys from the band were free. I would do it, because I really wasn't planning on performing this year at all, because I have an album to finish and I have another project that I'm working on. I really wasn't going to perform for at least a year or two.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, yeah, I'll come and do that. That was supposed to be in June. So once we agreed to do that, I said, well, if we have to come together to rehearse, to get ready for one show, we might as well do.
Yeah.
We might as well do a few shows anyway, just to be out there. I didn't want to go away for too long. I didn't really want to go any more than a month away from my work. But I wanted very much to go to Russia to play. So I said, let's see if we can go to Russia. And we're going there in about 10 days. And then to try and play places that we didn't play on the Graceland tour. Although we did play Brussels. And we did do one show in Paris. But we really didn't play in Italy. We didn't play in Spain. We didn't play in Scandinavia. So I said, let's go and take the show to the places that we didn't play. We did a little concert in New York in February for a benefit for we have a very serious problem in New York with homeless people,
The medicals.
and particularly the children of the homeless. And I've been involved in an organization called the New York Children's Health Project that provides free medical care to homeless children. So there was a big dinner that was being put together where they were getting rich people to buy $1,000 for a plate dinner, and I asked the guys to come and play that night to raise. We were going to try and raise $1 million for this cause. So we had to get back together. It was so much fun to get back, and the band is so good, that we all said, "Oh, this would be great. Why don't we go and do this again?" And I said, "Well, Johnny Clegg wants us to do this, so let's do it." So that's really how this all came about. But really, it doesn't require much of an excuse for us, because it's a great troupe. We had a really good time when we toured.
But it's such a natural kind of music. It's not stuck in its own structure. Take any Western band, and you feel the need to hear a song. You feel the need to hear a certain structure, whether it's a ballad or a hard rock song. And there are a lot of good songs. But there is such a big difference between African music and the Anglo-American songs.
Right. That's so. The structure is different. And if you're not aware of what the structure is, it either sounds like it just sounds unfamiliar, so you don't recognize the structure. But actually, there's a very rigid structure to African music, as rigid as there is to Western music. But the South African culture and their music it's so rich that you can listen to it very happily for quite a long time. And then this show has so many different sounds available to it. You have me and the songs from Graceland. You have Hugh and the songs that he sings and plays. Miriam, who is the mother of South African music, of African music, one of the great singers of Africa, and Black Mambazo with that chorus. So the show is really varied, and you can keep changing it, and I think it keeps the interest alive without the strain that a lot of rock shows have, where you just have the one group and they're going to play their hits, and after they play their hits, well, you don't really want to.
How big is the contradiction when you get back to New York again from that South African type of music, back in the suburbans of New York, in the city of New York?
Well, for musically?
Well, musically and socially, and when all the things happening around New York.
Well, musically, I'm going from South African music into Brazilian, West African music, and it's not a very hard transition to make. And socially, I don't really live in suburban New York, you know.
No.
No, there's no transition required at all. I mean, these are people that have been my friends now for years, and to me it's like seeing my friends again. I mean, I see them periodically. Anyway, Hugh lives in New York, so I see him periodically. Black Mambazo tours once or twice a year. Whenever they come through, I see them, and I usually go and sing with them at a concert or something. And it's just sort of been that ever since we toured with Graceland, at least once a year, we've all met up and played somewhere. And each time it ends, we think, well, it's so sad for it to end. But now I see, well, there's really no reason for it to end. We can come back every couple of years and play for our own fun, as long as people like it.
Yeah. You started with Graceland about 3 years ago already. What did you want to achieve with it?
Well, I didn't have any goals other than musical goals when I started it. And what I wanted to achieve was, I wanted to make the songs that I was writing worthy of the music that was being played. That was all I wanted to do. And for a long while after I had recorded the tracks to the album, I thought, well, I really can't write anything here. I can't do this because the tracks are too perfect. And anything I put on is just going to take away from how great the music is. You know? But eventually I began to find ways of writing songs. So that was all I was trying to do, was to write at the best of my abilities, to be, you know, worthy of the music that I was singing over. And then that was my goal as an artist. After the album came out, and there was enormous cultural and political implications from it, well, then there were other things that we had to achieve. We had to explain what we were doing to the world community. We had to defend ourselves from those that criticized us for doing it, and explain why we thought the criticism was invalid. And aside from that, we had to be an example of what two cultures that were disparate could achieve, and could one white guy from America make music with 25 blacks from South Africa, or from various countries in Africa, and would that be a musical evening? And I mean, we achieved that.
Yeah. Why did you want to go to Moscow?
I've never been to Russia. I don't think. I think this is a really wonderful time to go and see what's happening now in this period of glasnost. And I don't think that the Russians have seen any African music. So I really wanted to bring that to them, and to see what they thought of it. And I wanted to look around. I wanted to see the countryside. I wanted to see the people.
You've been in the music business for over 25 years. this was the best thing that ever happened to you, the Graceland tour, the Graceland combination, South African musicians with you?
Was it the best thing that ever happened?
Yeah,
to
was
me?
it?
Well, it was one of the great things that had happened to me. Really, my career has had a few things that were really extraordinary. I mean, my initial success with Simon and Garfunkel was worldwide. We performed everywhere, and we were very popular all over the world. Making the movie, doing the music to the movie The Graduate, that was the first time that a rock soundtrack had been done. Bridge Over Troubled Water was in its year the most popular song in the world. That was a thrill. Performing after we broke up, winning a Grammy for Best Album as a solo performer, that was really nice. The concert that we did in Central Park, where 500,000 people showed up, that was a big thrill. Graceland, Graceland was up there as one of the highlights of my career. Certainly.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
See you in Nijmegen next week.
Yeah.
Sunday. Thank you again.
Okay. Now.